Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is Sam Alexander with the news. In sports, a local thumb wrestling competition ended in 6 deaths earlier today. Witnesses on the scene reported the tournament's champion won decisive victories by almost immediately pinning his opponents as they each suffered a cardiac arrest. This incident marks his 4th consecutive championship win. Better luck next year, Thumbers. You're listening to Derry Public Radio. This is Derry Public Radio.
Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King book club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joshua Kahn, alongside CM Alexander.
Hello, everyone.
And today we are joined by a special guest in studio, filmmaker Ian Klink. Ian, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for hosting me. You all appreciate it in this amazing decked out room.
CM spends a lot of time collecting and organizing this room.
Sometimes I just sit and stare at my books.
I am right now. Jeez.
All right. Well, thank you for being with us. I want to ask you the 2 most important questions of this entire interview. And they're questions that I ask everybody. They are near and dear to our heart questions.
Yeah.
The first is, what was your introduction to Stephen King's work?
Oh, gosh. So I'll answer that 2 parts. So first introduction was when I was 4 years old. Everybody out there, I know everybody's going to have an opinion about it, for or against. I don't know what, but I had a recording on a VHS tape. But the old days where my parents recorded something, and the movie that followed it, they didn't shut off the VHS player, and I'm so grateful they didn't, because they recorded Creepshow 2 on HBO. And I literally, now as a 4-year-old, I shouldn't be watching Creepshow 2, right? Sure. I totally acknowledge, but my parents were actually really cool about it. They're very much, they didn't censor, they didn't do, because their whole approach is, we could say not to watch it, and you'll watch it anyways, then you're confused as hell. Or watch it, we talk about it, this and that. So, of course, I'm watching this movie about this blob that's, in the water, sucking people down in a raft. And, I had to ask my dad, how, is this real? And my dad's explained, no, that's a rubber arm, that's fake, it's this. My dad's explained the whole process. And so, but I didn't know that was a Stephen King. You don't know that when you're young. You just know of this movie is Creepshow 2. And, I watched that a lot. That was probably my first introduction, though, to Stephen King in a weird connected way. But I will tell you, and probably, I don't know if this is a question, but you probably ask, what's my favorite Stephen King book? And this is the one that it is. When I was in high school, I remember a classmate of mine, Amber Carlson. She's actually a librarian here in Davenport Public Library. Oh. So hello, Amber. Amber was reading this book. We were freshmen in high school, and of course, I'm a movie maker, so I'm a snob. You don't read books. You don't do that. But I never read books. I didn't really get into books. But I decided. I was looking at. She was in the cafeteria, and she was reading this book, and I saw the cover, and it was The Long Walk. And this is the mid-'90s cover, so for you Stephen King fans, it's the one that's kind of got a blue tint to it. It's got a skull and a fence and stuff like that on the cover. And I remember looking at it, and I'm like, what are you reading? What is that? It says Stephen King. I know Stephen King, but I haven't read it. And well, what's that about? And then she explains the story. And for all those of you who know the story, that just sucks you in.
Yeah. Oh,
because I remember telling us 3 warnings, and there's a long walk and 3 warnings, but on the 4th warning, boom. You what? Really? And she's like, yeah, it's a really great book. And she's explaining the whole story, and I go, okay, well. So she was about to finish it, and she's like, oh, I got a Parkview Library. So she took it back to Parkview Library, drove out there, picked it up, and it was a couple things. It was I couldn't put it down. That is a book that if you read that book, and have you both read?
Oh,
yeah, we've covered it on the show. Yeah.
Oh my God, I couldn't. I literally started reading and could not put it down. And for somebody who doesn't read a book, if you do that, that's something powerful. So, but it just opened up this world of, one, you discover that Stephen King is he really does write like a filmmaker. It's a very filmatic approach that he does his stories. But I just remember, you're reading as a freshman, you're about the age of these boys. And when I realized it's not about the story, it's how Stephen King interacts these characters, how these boys are going through this emotional trauma and building connections and becoming friends. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait, I need to beat you in order to not die, but I want to get close to you. And I remember just being a freshman reading it, just being sucked into that. Holy shit. This is, because then you start thinking about your friends. And what if we were in the competition? Would I want to survive? Yeah. So, and I couldn't put it down. And that just opened up the floodgate, right? I read that book and then it's like, oh, I remember watching Christine the movie. Okay, great. Let me and then you just start reading all of them. So yeah, The Long Walk, that was my Stephen King, like that opened up the whole constant reader world and getting into what he does. And I probably read that book 9 times now, and I'm probably going to read it again soon because it's due time. It's been a few
when
years.
you read it this time, you can listen along with our podcast.
I'm going to have to, absolutely. Yeah, but those two, I think Creepshow 2 and The Long Walk, those were my Stephen King kind of opening the door, and then like, oh wow, this is I want to read more. I want to get more involved.
That's a great introduction to Stephen King.
Oh, and I actually, to the point recently, a friend of mine who was actually in the movie, his daughter is a freshman in high school, and she was talking about like books she wants to read, and I ended up talking about The Long Walk, and to the point I just bought it at Barnes & Noble and gave it to her.
Nice.
You got to read this book. So yeah, I just gave that to her like a couple days ago. So yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, The Long Walk, great book.
So on our show, we talk about Stephen King moments, things in his work that can be perfectly mundane, but might just scare the crap out of you. For me, of course, it was the way he describes the hotel room door in 1408.
Oh, yeah.
And not for Josh, though. I built that up too much. And he was
there was too much
disappointed.
hype. Didn't affect me that way.
Do you have a Stephen King moment?
That just got me. Yeah, I'll be honest. Yeah. So I've read it twice, and the scene that always got me it's funny you use the word mundane, because there are those moments where other people might not think it's scary, but there's a scene where I think it's Ben is dreaming about being on this baseball diamond, and he looks in the background and all the players, all of a sudden everybody's missing, everybody's gone, but there's a grass-grown tall grass field in the background of this baseball diamond. I remember reading it, and I hope I'm not misinterpreting or misreading what I have, but I remember it was, he looks out, and in the tall grass, there's just the clown just looking and not making a noise, not making a face, not eating a hand or like in the movie or something, but it's just a clown looking at him. And I remember that moment haunted me. I don't know why, and I think it's because the word you used, mundane. It was just such a creepy, non-scare, non-jump, not trying to get. It's just he looks out and there's just the clown, and it's just staring at him. That to me was like a Stephen King moment of like, you look down in the basement, it's dark, that picture pops in your head. That's the moment I think I remember the most of reading Stephen King that really got to me. I can have Annie Wilkes can chop off a guy's foot. I can do that. That doesn't boggle me or anything like that. But just something about that creepy clown just staring at you and controlling and just.
It makes your
creeping me out now.
It makes your filmmaker brain go into overdrive.
It does. Well, and because as a filmmaker, that wouldn't really probably be interesting on film, and yet could you do that? I think you're right. That if I had done it, if I had filmed it, I probably would add that scene because it did freak me out so much. But it's not like like in the movie where it's painting comes alive and comes after you or any of that stuff or. or the jump scare where the balloon pops and there he is. It's just, he looks out and there's just this creepy, and I can hear the noise too, the grass blowing and all that stuff.
You're not going to sleep tonight.
Yeah, I'm not.
That's what's going to happen.
Funny, can I tell a story? This is funny. Last night, I'm reading some of the interview questions you guys have sent me and just trying to think of some answers and stuff like that. And I live out in Iowa City in West Branch, where my parents live, and I'm staying there while making this film. And I'm reading the questions, and my window is up. And again, when you're in the country, for anybody in Iowa country, it's creepy at night. It just can be creepy. But I'm fine. But if you live out there, you're fine with it. Eventually, like, all right, whatever, But I'm sitting on the couch, and my parents had the couch right by the window, and we had the windows up, and I'm hearing the grass kind of blow, which again, that's why I can hear that noise. But the grass is blowing, and then all of a sudden, I don't know why, but the room over here, we had the window open. As I'm reading your questions and thinking about, okay, Firestarter, It, Silver Bullet, this, okay, I'm thinking of all these movies. The door cracks open, but it is such that, and I swear to God, I'm not making this up. The door, and it's that noise from like the old horror haunted movies that literally, oh God, oh shit, and I got so scared. But again, it's those images you're getting in your head that just kind of just jolt you. But so I don't know if that was good luck charm or whatever. But yeah,
we'll take it.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. That was a scary moment.
So we've talked a little bit, referenced your filmmaking. So I think it's time to tell our listeners the reason that we have you here today is because you are in the Quad Cities making a film with a good friend of ours. And she informed us that in grad school, you got a dollar baby.
I did. Yes. The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands was my grad school thesis film. So yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones who got to do a Stephen King dollar baby in grad school. So it was unique. We were the first one to do that story. I've always been proud of that. Nobody had ever done that story before.
Wow.
And that was actually part of the process. When I heard about the dollar baby process, and for those of you out there that don't know, Stephen King, ever since Frank Darabont did a movie called The Woman in the Room, which was a really, really interesting story because it's non-horror. It was Stephen King writing about his mother dying of cancer, and it's basically a story about a man being afraid to be in the room while his mother dies. And just kind of getting nightmares about having to be there, and Frank Darabont, was in college and he wanted to do this story, but he didn't have a lot of money, and he was one. This is the early days, like in the 70s, when Stephen King's just starting out. And so Frank Darabont he wrote to him and said, I would like to adapt this story. And Stephen King knew he didn't have much money. And so he talked to his lawyer, and Stephen King came up with this idea that if you pay $1, legally Stephen King can give you the rights to the story, but that also gives Stephen King the right to control it, so it's not abusing and stuff like that. But, he wanted to do that, for Frank Darabont. And graciously enough, he decided, other people heard about this, and he decided against his lawyer's wishes, he writes about, to do that. So if you are a student filmmaker in either high school or college, he'll license the rights to one of his stories for $1. Now, of course, when you're a huge Stephen King fan and you're a filmmaker and I'll be honest, I can't remember how I figured it out or how I discovered this, because this is kind of pre Wikipedia and all this knowledge. And now on his webpage, I know he has a whole thing about how to do it. But I think I found on the internet, you write to his office and do that. But I decided, after having made a few films and graduating, and knew I was going to go to Savannah College of Art and Design for my master's, I knew I needed a thesis film. And so I just on a whim, I said, well, what if I tried to do a dollar baby? Why not try to see what it is? Wrote to them, and they gave me the rights to do it. So I'll talk more about the process, but that was kind of the initial thing about the dollar baby, which was fascinating. He just allows you to do that.
That's incredibly exciting.
That was, yeah.
What inspired your love of filmmaking just from the get-go?
Oh, wow. Well, I said the Creepshow 2 thing, but the other movie that really, I'll be honest, that did it was Ghostbusters.
Nice.
Ghostbusters is, my parents tell this. I used to watch that 6 times a day, something where I'd watch it, I'd rewind it, I'd watch it, rewind it, to the point my parents to this day cannot watch Ghostbusters. They're just done.
You ruined it.
I ruined it. They just can't do it anymore. But yeah, Ghostbusters, that was, I told my parents I was like 5, I want to make movies. Now, I don't know what that is. I don't know how that is. You don't know what, but I want to be the guy that makes that. And that just opened up, like I said, that opens up the floodgates too. You start studying movies. They start telling you how to do movies, and your parents give you kind of, you should watch this movie. And, you just kind of build up, that. But through the process, it's interesting growing up in the 90s. One of the healthiest diets that we got was actually Stephen King adaptations and Stephen King movies. Yeah. And so, HBO shows, Misery and shows Graveyard Shift. And so, part of filmmaking and learning is watching these kind of movies. So, it's interesting, but yeah, like I said, I didn't read Stephen King before high school. Like that was but the movies I used to watch a lot. I actually to this day, and I actually just got to meet him and have him sign it. But I remember when I was 11, I was at an ABC studio taking a tour as a class or something. I remember this guy gave me, here, have this. And, it was a little marquee stand for The Stand, the ABC miniseries. And so I had this before it was coming out, so I knew the date. And I remember watching the miniseries of The Stand, and like we all kind of watched that and just being part of that world. But I actually got Mick Garris to actually sign that. And I said, I've been waiting 11 years since I was 11 to get you to sign this. And wonderful man, Mick Garris, wonderful director. But of course, I think that I connected more with before I read the books was the filmmakers who make the, and of course, I remember being at the Iowa City Library and renting The Shining, and actually watched it at the, I remember this very specific. I remember watching The Shining at the Iowa Public Library or Iowa City Library. They had a video monitor. You could watch it. And I remember, of course, gets to the, oh gosh, I'm going to blank on this. Don't kill me, fans. The room number, but in the movie, I think it's 217 in the movie.
Yeah.
It's 217 in the movie. Yeah. The famous 217 movie or 217 moment. And, I'm sitting there watching this. All of a sudden, this naked girl comes on screen, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I gotta shut it off because I'm in the library, and all these people are watching." That was very embarrassing. But yeah. So to me, I think even before the books was watching the Stephen King movies, and of course that Creepshow 2 connection. Then all of a sudden, one day realizing, whoa, Stephen King wrote that. Oh, these are Stephen King stories. Oh, okay. And then, doing the connection with, I remember at the same library, Iowa City Library, I remember finding the comic book of Creepshow. And I was like, I want to read this. And then, I'm reading it and it's really cool. And you see it's Stephen King and then you're like, oh, wait, this is a movie? There's a movie of Creepshow. Wait, Creepshow 2. So I remember, this is great. 1:00 in the morning. On ABC, they showed Creepshow one night, and I just happened to flip to it, and I got into the middle of like Father's Day episode, and watch it, and there's something really cool about those old school days of having commercials within Creepshow and watch. And I remember just watching that, loving every second of it, to the point I wish I had a recorded copy of it with the commercials
and all.
Yeah, like that would be so cool if you had that. So if anybody has that, please send it in to Derry Public Radio so that I can see a copy.
Yeah, we'll forward you a copy.
Yeah, please do, because it was just so cool. You get to the point where I specifically remember the gravestone like lands on Ed Harris, and then all of a sudden it cut to commercial. Is your stomach hurting? Stuff like that. I remember that. But yeah, so that the movies are really what I first connected with Stephen King on, and then just got into by the time I got to high school, I did a lot of theater beforehand because in Iowa there's not a lot of filmmaking, so it's kind of like, well, what do you do if you don't know how to make films or what? Well, theater's the close. I remember my father telling me, well, theater's close enough. Why don't you try theater? So did a lot of theater stuff, but really then, once I was in college, that's when I really started making short films and having grown a love for horror. I made a couple of horror short films and and all this stuff. But that led to the point of like, oh, well, if I'm doing a short horror movies, why not do a short Stephen King horror movie. And, that kind of led to the path of finding The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands. So
yeah. We have all of the adaptations you've seen. What do you think is your favorite adaptation?
Oh, man. That's hard. That's hard. Because let me be honest, we all know this. There are some really amazing Stephen King adaptations.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some really amazing, shitty adaptations that we all get disappointed with. Can I ask you guys this? What is your stand on Dreamcatcher? I just need to know.
I've never read it or seen it.
Oh, really? Oh, have you?
Oh, man. I'm kind of torn because I love Damien Lewis.
Yeah.
And so it's very Dreamcatcher. I have it. It's very easy for me to watch in spite of some things that might turn me off from the movie because of him, because I just love watching him do anything.
Yeah.
And then it's something that I feel like as we've read other works like Tommyknockers and different things, I'm kind of seeing some influence or some connections on purpose or not. I don't know, but it makes me a little bit more nostalgic for it than initially. I was like, no, I don't know.
Yeah.
I got to revisit it. And I think I change my mind about it every time.
I do that a lot too. I've gotten to the point now I have to see a movie like 2 or 3 times before I can really make my opinion about it. I actually did that with It 2, Chapter 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first time I watched it, I was very upset. And mainly because when they did the adaptation, to me, that whole book is about remembering. It's about remembrance. So the fact that they split it up and there's no, it's not beginning with kids, adults remembering what they were like as a kids. I didn't like that. I felt that was very frustrating. But then, then the way that they did it in the second one, the first time I'm like, did I like that? It wasn't like the miniseries, but that's also because we grew up with the miniseries, and you just have a love for Tim Curry and that.
Oh, yeah.
That scared me as a kid. I remember being at my grandparents' seeing specifically the scene with Belch brings him in and he turns into the dog head.
Yeah.
I remember that freaking me out as a kid. Those adaptations are really challenged sometimes. And I'll also say this too. The fact a movie gets made is a miracle. I mean, I stand by, and I teach this to my students too. Tim Burton did a computer simulation that said, put all the factors in that it takes to make a movie. And the NASA computer basically said, it is empirically impossible to make a movie. No movie should get made. So, I understand when sometimes they try to make a movie of a short 6-page story that they stretch out and all of a sudden it doesn't turn out the way you thought that it should, i.e. The Mangler, which is a fun movie.
Yeah.
But you read the story and it's like, this has nothing to do with anything that's in this little 6-page story or they expand the graveyard shift to be this story about class warfare within the blue collar class, which is great. I love that movie. But sorry, long story short, back to your question. I would say the best for me, I love what they did with Dolores Claiborne. It encaptures the book, but also expands upon it a little bit by adding the investigation and Dolores Claiborne. I probably read I probably read 2 or 3 times because I just love that character he creates is so. I think we all know that lady. We all know that grandmother or that aunt that's just so piss bull-hearted that because I love in the story when she keeps saying, "You can write it down. I don't give a shit what you say." I did it. I don't care. I love reading that. But what Kathy Bates did in that with that character and Christopher Plummer, which is not in the book, his character, that was a great adaptation. Obviously, it's easy to say like, Shawshank Redemption and Stand By Me, all those, but the one that I think captured King in his world and mixing the film with that world, I think Misery I think really captured the book. Because if I'm honestly answering of how adaptations from his work directly to screen, I think that one did the best. Because you can see Stephen King in that in Misery. So I would think that one.
if I can spoil a little bit of our podcast for you, if you go back and listen to our Misery series, we have a long conversation about the fact that you can treat the book and the movie as one continuous story, because in the book he constantly, when they ask him if he'll ever write a story about what happened to him, he says, I can't.
Oh, wow.
Because it wouldn't be scary enough.
Mm-hmm.
So if you treat what the movie as what actually happened and the book as him finally writing the story, because it's so much more brutal and violent. That it pans out to one like connected story with the two of them equally existing.
Well, and I love what Rob Reiner and William Goldman did. The fact, because sorry, spoiler alerts if you haven't read the book, she actually cuts off his feet,
which is amazing.
Which it is. And in the book, you're like, oh my God. But in the movie, if you had done that, I think that actually would have turned off audiences. So I actually think they were smart in that, because, as a filmmaker, your job is to, and some go above and beyond. I don't think you should turn off your audience. And I know there's some filmmakers that love that. Like, no, I'm going to throw everything at you and I don't care. They kind of do Dolores Claiborne. I don't give a shit what you think. But if you do that, you're going to turn off the audience. And I'll tell you, I think, talking about Frank Darabont, I do think he did that with The Mist.
The Mist is great.
The Mist
it's
is
a
amazing.
wonderful movie. It's a great movie, but I end up stopping it 5 minutes before the movie ends.
Yeah.
Well, I love that ending.
I know.
I love it.
And I know Stephen King loves it, but I remember being in the audience, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why that gets people. I know exactly why it does it. You can kick an audience in the balls once. And I stand by. You can do it once. You do it twice, and that you've lost them. And I remember we're in the audience, like when he did that, when he takes care of the people in the car. Again, I don't want to spoil it, but when he takes care of the people in the car, you feel for him. I mean, I was in the theater. I'm crying. Like, I have tears in my eyes, and this is the worst. And then when he gets out of the car, you just, that lost me. That absolutely lost me. And I remember being in the audience. It lost the audience too. And I remember a guy screaming like, "Are you kidding me? Are you serious?"
It's kind of a cheap shot.
Oh,
it is. Like, I think you're right. That's what I
don't know, man. It took my breath away.
It does. It does.
Like, in such an intense way. Also, I took a first date to that movie. Never had a second date.
Awkward, right? Yeah. So do we get coffee now?
I feel like they were trying to out Stephen King with that last bit, which blew my mind, because Stephen King has destroyed my heart so many times.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But yeah, I can't help but love it. And anytime I go to a hotel, I try my best to remember, if they give you stationery, to write his little speech that he was writing on there, and just leave it for the cleaning
that's
ladies.
Awesome. Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Yeah. Well, I do agree. Like, you got to keep your audience in mind as a filmmaker, as opposed to doing, and another perfect example is Cujo, which I think Cujo is a great adaptation, because Dee Wallace, she did. I told Dee Wallace this when I met her at a convention. I said, you were robbed of an Oscar nomination. Like, you really were, because what you do when she yells, that scene where she yells at Danny, he's talking, he's just crying, he's scared, he wants his dad, and all of a sudden she just shouts at him like, "All right, I'll get your dad." The producers wanted to refilm it, because they're like, you can't yell at a kid.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a great on the making of Cujo. She talks about this. They wanted to refilm it. And, Dee Wallace is a parent, and she goes, Are you a parent? And the producer goes, "No." She goes, "Shut up." and I love it, because it's so true.
That's amazing.
That moment, she just, you love your children, but you hate them so much. And I think that's just a great, but at the end, as we all know, if you've read the book, there's a very different ending in the book. That's really just, it is a gut wrencher. You're just like, oh. And Stephen King has talked about this, though. In a book, you can do that. You can have that country. And I think if they'd done The Mist in a book, it would have been okay. If they'd done that ending in his actual, which he said, "I wish I had." But in, the end of Cujo, Danny lives. Sorry for the spoiler. But, Danny lives. And Stephen King has said, in a movie, you need a happy ending. You need that kind of positive moment for people to leave the audience, not only for the audience to be happy and enjoy the fact that this was worth it for the hour or 2 hours that they're doing, but also spreading of word in business. Like, that's what killed The Mist. That ending, everybody went out and wrote about it on the internet and told their friends and all this. By the second weekend, nobody went to go see The Mist. All because of that ending.
That's crazy.
And Frank Darabont's like, hey, that's the studio gave the studio. I said I would only do it, and I'll do it cheap if you let me do this ending. The company said sure. So I totally get why they do it, but yeah, I think overall, I think Misery. I think Misery captures what they do, but again, changing it to hobbling was a perfect way of keeping your audience in mind too. Because I think if you chopped off with the axe, I think you would have lost the audience.
That scene's so iconic now.
Oh yeah, it is. It's an amazing.
I did last October. We did a Stephen King burlesque show. And one of my performers.
You want to see the Tommy knockers?
one of my performers did Annie Wilkes, so she hobbled me on stage for her routine.
Oh my gosh, that's great!
Oh god, it was amazing. It was so much fun.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think the movie and Kathy Bates' portrayal of Annie made her more of a real person and more of a sympathetic person.
Oh yeah,
you could love and hate at the same time. In the book, she's just like this almost otherworldly monster, and in the movie you're like, I can see that
she's a person, just a real fucked up person.
Yeah. Well, and that's the one thing I have always said about Stephen King. He writes real, like like his characters, even they're in this weird situation, he writes them so realistically, even the ones you hate. The ones that you can't stand the characters, the Craig Stiltsons, the Dead Zone, but that's obviously we know now is kind of real in current situations. but that reality that's within those characters, and I think you're right. Like Annie Wilkes, he talks about the mental state of her and how it is, and you can see it. And in a weird way, you sympathize with her, even though she's doing these horrible, terrible things. You get it. Rereading it not too long ago because I knew the movies are coming out, had a totally different viewpoint of Henry Bowers in reading that book and reading it as a teacher now, where I'm constantly looking at kids who sometimes are having troubles at home and how that influences what they do at the school. When I was 16, I just thought he was a jerk because I knew Henry Bowers, and you stayed away from Henry Bowers. But as an adult and as a teacher, it was like,
I just stay away from anybody wearing a leather jacket.
Yeah, right.
That's the rule.
That's the rule.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes they come back. That's
a
good one. That's a good one. Nobody talks about sometimes they come back. Nobody talks about it. I love that story, and I love that movie.
Sequel too. It's fine.
Is that on your shelf? Is it over there?
No, I don't. I don't have either of them. I watched them as a teenager at my grandparents' house over and over again.
Even sometimes they come back again. It's actually a good movie.
It is good.
So for you fans out there, go get those. Those are so good.
Hey, it's no Pet Sematary 2.
No.
Speaking of, what is your least
this
favorite?
This has been the end of this broadcast.
What would you say is your least favorite King adaptation?
I thought about it last night. I like all of them. That's the problem.
Even
the bad ones I like. I know.
Yeah, Maximum Overdrive. It's just fun.
The classic thing is to say Lawnmower Man. I think everybody will always say Lawnmower Man is the word because it's not Lawnmower Man.
Nothing.
It's just they bought the title. That was all. But to me, I think the one that doesn't do the book justice is probably Firestarter.
Yeah, we covered Firestarter, and there are a lot of problems in that adaptation.
Well, and I also know some of the making of Firestarter. Originally it was supposed to be John Carpenter, who got fired off of it because...
Sorry, he's my favorite.
Oh, I love
John.
I love John Carpenter. Oh, I love him. But he was supposed to do Firestarter, but because the thing bombed, he got fired. And so, that movie got into turnaround, and then they gave it to a director who is very used to doing things fast. Like he's very much in the TV world of Universal.
Gotcha.
He's a great director. Mark Lester, I think was his name, but great director, but he was used to doing things fast. I think that story, the intricacy when you read the book is Charlie. Charlie is such this innocent child and going through the horrors of what she's going through. And I think spending more time, especially at Drew Barrymore, who really was a good actress, child actress. I just don't think that hit well. I think that really it just didn't work as best as it should have.
Also, Rainbird is one of the scariest villains of all time.
Yeah.
And that movie
George
not
C.
do him
Scott
justice.
is not a Native American.
He
I don't know.
He is
I don't know
not.
why.
He is not.
He's not intimidating.
And
Not
yeah,
in
he's
that
not
movie.
scary.
Yeah. So that's why I think Firestarter is one of those, like, there's a good movie there. I think it is, and I enjoyed watching it, growing up and see, but it just didn't. And I think the only other one I did think of, and I love the movie, but I think the makeup effect ruined it a bit, was Silver Bullet. I really think there's a good movie in Silver Bullet, and it's a good screenplay, and it's good, and I think he adapted his own work well, because Stephen King wrote the screenplay, but the werewolf doesn't pay off.
Yeah.
And I've always said, if you're going to do a werewolf movie, your werewolf has to be like, you have to focus on the werewolf for a werewolf movie. It's just a vampire. You can cheat. A vampire, it's like, I can get away with just teeth. Like, it's fine. You don't have to focus on the vampire. It doesn't have to be a monster. But a werewolf is the monster.
Yeah.
You have to have that payoff. So
The Gary Busey pays off.
he does. I love as Red. He's great. Yeah, that's
he's
what I'm
awesome.
saying. I think the movie itself is good. I just don't think that pays off. But yeah, I would go Firestarter. I think they just didn't do the book justice on that adaptation. Although, like I said, Lawnmower Man is just crap.
All right, let's get into our main topic at hand.
Yes.
Your Dollar Baby project. You said you did The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands. It's so amazing that you did this, because we've talked before that before we did the interview, I was telling you about our Patreon show. The Club is based on that world, because when we covered the breathing method, we were obsessed with this club, and The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands is the only other story King has written that involves the club.
And I agree with you. I was listening to your podcast. I agree with you. The club should have been the story. The club was always the fascinating part. But I also think what would have been interesting if somewhere in there, and this is just speculation, 100%, but that would be a great anthology series.
Absolutely.
Telling the tale from the book club. And I wonder if he thought that. I really do, because that's really when I read the breathing method in college, which is when I read different seasons, that's what I thought when I remember reading the story. I'm like, this is a weird structure. And you all talked about that. This is a weird structure for the book, because, well, I thought, is it going to be this story? No, wait, now we're going over to this weird story about Lamaze and severed heads and kicking them, and you're reading all this stuff. But then it goes back to this really weird story, and this Stevens guy, and this, yes, there are more rooms, but you're not going to know. And what? But then, and it's interesting. What led me to choose The Man Who Wouldn't Shake Hands was actually hearing, there's another story about this book club. Oh, okay, well. And I remember I had Skeleton Crew, and I didn't know this. I pick it up and I flip through, and I'm reading, and I'm like, wow, this is okay. There's a story within the club. Oh, that's so cool. This is a story about the club, even though it kind of does have a weird off-put about it, but that's awesome. I love that. So that's actually why. It was because finally there was a story about the club, and I think probably that's why he wrote The Man Who Wouldn't Shake Hands. He doesn't talk about it. Like, in the back of Skeleton Crew, he really doesn't say why he does that story. He has for every other story, he has a lot of stories, which is great that Stephen King does that, because I actually like reading. Why did you make that story? But that one he doesn't talk about. So I never knew why he did The Man Who Would Shake Hands. But I remember reading it and thinking, wow, you could actually really make this a movie. This could actually be a really short, interesting movie. When I wrote the letter to his secretary, Marcia DeFilippo, which I've never had a chance to publicly thank her. So I want to thank you guys for giving me this chance. Mrs. DeFilippo, thank you so much for all of your help in getting this movie made. I wrote down if I could have the rights to either two stories, because I didn't know which ones were, because now he has a list on his website that says what stories you can and cannot do.
Yeah.
Then I had no clue. So one was The Man Who Wouldn't Shake Hands. The other one was Uncle Otto's Truck. I don't know if you've ever read that story. It's a weird, interesting story, which is I still don't understand kind of how it works, but basically it's kind of like a haunted truck that just sits in this field in the middle.
And it gets closer?
Yeah, it keeps getting closer and closer and closer
to the point where forgot about that.
To the point where one day the guy, Otto, wakes up and he has I can't remember exactly how, but he has like oil coming out of his nose and gears are on his bed, and I just remember that was like visually as a filmmaker, I could do that. That's easy. You know, and that's why I tried to think about what stories could I do that would make a good beginning, middle, and end, and have a visual look that could be interesting. And those were the two stories. And she said, and the letter I got back, and I still have a copy of it somewhere, but you know, she says, you have the rights to do either The Man Who Wouldn't Shake Hands or Uncle Otto's Truck. So, and I remember the process, you know, then it was you write a letter. I would say it took about 6 weeks, maybe less. Because I remember it was a short time period. Like I thought it was going to be like a year. Like I thought I'd never hear anything. But then I got this letter in Stephen King's office. You know, you're frantically opening it up and reading it, and she said, "Yeah, you have the rights. You just have to send this contract where you put down what story you're doing, your information." And there was some, if I remember right, there was some legal paper that was in there that kind of had a few things about what you can and cannot do. But I remember I reread the two stories that night, and I decided to do The Man Who Wouldn't Shake Hands. So I wrote that, send it to her office, and with $1 money order, you know, because that's the deal. You got to send $1. And yeah, and then we had the rights to do the story after I did that. And then I didn't. That was the interesting part. When I went to grad school, I thought it would be too difficult to do that, and I remember thinking, you know, you get influenced, you see all the other movies people are making and stuff, and I'm like, oh, they're making all these dramas about divorce and people committing suicide, and that's, you know, so, you know, you go, oh, I should do a movie like that because that's what is getting made. So I put it aside, honestly. And we were going to do another horror movie that eventually I made, a little short movie called Raw. We were going to do that as my thesis, but then I remember talking to my professor, Michael Nolan, one day, a wonderful producer, actually produced Mr. Holland's Opus. That was his big kind of, you know, and great teacher, great guy. I remember he was my thesis coordinator, and one day I talked to him, and I don't know how I did it. I remember the images in my head were outside the building talking, but I mentioned, oh, you know, I do have rights to a Stephen King story. And he stopped. And I'll never forget him saying this. He goes, and if can I do language?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He goes, why the fuck aren't you doing that story? I said, well, I guess I am doing that story based on what you just said. And so yeah, then we started the process of scrapping everything and doing The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands, and we started the process with it. Yeah, it was interesting. Like I said, we weren't going to do it because I just thought it'd be too difficult. But then, of course, the minute, you know, we said we're doing, the word got around, and all of a sudden, I got so many crew that wanted to be on this story.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah.
So, what was the theory behind? Because we talked before, the story goes, you know, past and present. Being faced with trying to tell the story in two different times in your film, you focused on the incident itself. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what led you to that decision to just focus on that part of the story? Yeah,
I remember talking Kevin, fellow classmate of mine. He was going to be a screenwriter, and Kevin and I, we talked a lot about the story because he read it and he was going to do the screenplay, and that was part of the process too. You know, when you're in grad school, you know, everybody, you don't want to just do everything yourself. You know, so my focus was to be the director. You know, his focus is to be a writer. We got another producer. Like that, the whole point is you're supposed to know every part. You're supposed to, you know, get a bunch of, you know, it's collaboration. That's what it is. So it wasn't like I could adapt it. It was the whole point was get somebody else to adapt it. And so, you know, Kevin was the writer, and when we started talking about, you know, how to make it, and this is the interesting thing, you know, so now you kind of veer away from, you know, you're doing a Stephen King movie to you're just making a movie. So now it's the logistics of, okay, what budget do I have? Well, my budget was $4,000 because my refund check for that semester was going to be $4,000. So, plus I had to automatically, the rules of the school was you had to pay for insurance. You don't ever use it, but that was, you know, and which I get, they're trying to prepare you for real life and real filmmaking. You got to have insurance. Okay, well, so automatically that was $700 just to have insurance that, in case something happens, obviously it was going to happen, but you know, you kind of always think nothing's going to happen. So, okay, I'm wasting $700. Oh, that great. Well, so now subtract that. Now I have this amount left. Okay, well now I got to get food. I got to do, you know, and so it got to the point you budgeted down. I had to just do whatever with. I had maybe $1,500 15, 2,000, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But I also still had to pay rent. I also had to do, so I'm having to like whittle it down to basically I have $1,000 to do this, to do this adaptation of a Stephen King movie. Well, I say you all that to tell you that India went out the door. So as much as we would have loved to have the part about India in the movie. Now in my, at 35, I know how we could have done it, how we could have gone, and this is, and even without blue screen. I don't know if you all have seen it. There's one of my favorite adaptations of Stephen King is his episode, The Black Cat from the Tales from the Dark Side of the movie. Yeah. John Hare's a great director. Actually, I've emailed him a few times. Wonderful guy. Really cool guy. Have you? Oh, he's great. He's great. Yeah. He did this really cool thing in that movie where he did a lot of theater. Like he did this, he used a lot of scrims and transitions where it looks like they're in a car in the middle of a country, but they're actually not. They're on a studio, and he made it look like it was theatrics. And I was like, that's what we should have done. We could have done India if we did it that way because it was cheap. That was a cheap way of doing it. But there was just no way at that time that and the school didn't really have the blue screen technology like it is right now, which is only 10 years later. But now they have a whole room that's all green screen, and students make all movies with green screen. Yeah, it's great. But then we didn't. So it was like, okay, well, India's got to go. And then, I'll be honest, as a filmmaker, I think you look at the failures, and I think to the Stephen King fans, to you constant readers, where I failed was not finding a beautiful library. And we tried so hard, but when you're a low budget filmmaker and you're working with companies and they don't want you coming in to disturb business, and so what I remember now is we had a place that had this gorgeous, one of those libraries with books stacked, all up and down, kind of like CM's amazing room here. I don't remember all the details now. It's been so many years ago, but I remember it didn't work out. But what did work out was SCAD, Savannah College of Art Design, had a building that I think was the admissions building, and they had this beautiful fireplace and this long table. Because in the story, deals with, basically a man who cannot shake hands. The title says it all. But the long story, or the short story of it, is that the character is being invited to this amazing book club because he can't have interactions. He has to distance himself, and he's going to come to this club, and he ends up playing poker, which, if you play poker from a filmmaking standpoint, that's beautiful shots because it's all hands. And if this whole story is about hands, that's great stuff. So that's why I really like the story. It had this long table and had the fireplace where I could put this great quote, it's not the tale, it's he who tells it. And I could do all this stuff. And they had shelves where I could put books. So I said, okay, that will work. We've got a room where pretty much the whole movie takes place. But we didn't have that. What I envisioned reading The Breathing Method and the Man Who Wouldn't Shake Hands was this big, old, with random books that nobody knows. But, for $1,000, we did okay.
So one of the things, some of the changes that you guys made that I really liked, one was the changing his fear, saying he had brittle bone disease. And that's why he wouldn't touch people, instead of him just explaining he got I think in the story he's like just a germaphobe.
Yeah.
So I thought that change like really, when you do, because I know when you do a movie you have to shorten certain things and not get it bogged down in some details. So I thought that was like such a smart decision to just kind of jump over all of that.
Yeah, and and it's also interesting being a Stephen King fan. Adapting a Stephen King story, you the one thing that I always did is I always got mad at the ones that did veer from his story, because the whole point is you're doing a Stephen King story. Stay with the story. That's why everybody wants to see this. And as I've gotten older and done more movies, I understand why you have to veer away sometimes. You got to tell a story a little bit differently. Really, one of your jobs as a filmmaker is you have to shut up that guy. And we all know that guy. He's in the theater. He's the guy. Well. Why doesn't he do that? Well, why don't they go there? Why don't you leave? Why, I hate that guy. We all hate that. And actually in the movie, there's a scene that we added, and we added it purposely for that guy. It was he was wearing gloves. And that was the question. Why does he just wear gloves?
The fly, I like that.
And it was this fly. So in the movie, we have a scene where he walks into a club and he looks up at a chandelier, and this fly is buzzing around when the fly comes down and right on his, lands on his hand, and then it dies. Now, it's also kind of cool. We had a digital fly and lands, and then, being in Savannah, dead flies everywhere. We did not kill a fly. I promise you, we didn't kill a fly, but we found a dead fly. And so then, you cut away to his eyes. It cuts back. There's a dead fly. He drops it, plops to the ground. Well, that was to shut up that guy.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he just wear gloves? Well, he can't. So shut up. All right. So yeah, that was kind of the same thing. It's like, well, how does he explain it? Why doesn't he just not touch people? Why does he just not go to club? Well, he's social. Okay. Well, he's got to make up an order. Well, he's got brittle bone disease. Okay. Covered that guy. Yeah. And I remember Kevin and I talking a lot about that. And just going with the idea. Well, I remember this was the one thing. One of that guy questions was really, and it's kind of gross, but how does he go to the bathroom? Well, I was not going to explain how he goes to the bathroom, but we did film an opening montage where he's shaving and he's getting ready, and he's carefully with his hands. He's slowly holding the razor, and he's slow, kind of like he's holding chopsticks or something there. He's, slowly shaving and slowly tying his tie so his hands don't touch. And I remember doing a couple takes where he touched his hands. I said, we got to redo it. You touched your hands to the Matt, the actor who was really great in the role. But I remember that was our way of, okay, well, that silenced that question. How does he go to the bathroom? We showed you shaving. That's how he does it. I don't know if he uses tongs. I don't know.
I hate to admit this. I think I might be that guy.
I know, right? I know.
Well, because I didn't think, I thought everything was cool, like with the fly and stuff, and I didn't think about gloves, but I was like, this is gross. I was like, can you masturbate? That's so sad.
You don't talk about no.
Life finds a way.
Life finds a way. Hope springs eternal on that one. No, but then honestly, we asked that. Yeah. I remember specifically Courtney, who was our, I can't remember what role she did in the movie, but she asked that, how does he go to the bathroom? And I was like, God dang it. Fine, okay, we have to show a scene. And he was constantly trying to think, how do we shut up that guy? And I think we did okay. Yeah. I think we did all right.
Especially it's a brisk 18 minutes. Yeah. Like it is nice and concise.
Which we were the longest. And I'll tell you that one of the questions I remember you asking me, what do you remember the most that was just so difficult? Well, to be honest, what was difficult is the rules for your thesis movie was you can't do anything but write the script a semester before. So casting, filming, editing, color correcting, premiering it, all of that you have to do within 6 weeks.
Oh my God.
16 weeks. 16 weeks. It felt like 2. But yeah, 16 weeks you have to do everything. So we had the script in the spring. So this had been spring of 2007. Kevin had done multiple drafts, and I remember even we have a scene. We filmed it, but we had a dog that came to there's a scene where he's at the park and he's talking to telling the guy I can't do this. We actually had a dog come up, and the dog started licking his hands, and the dog which rule number 1, you can kick a baby. Can't kick a dog.
I get that.
Yeah, I know. So we were like, oh, we're already kind of breaking the taboo, but you know how damn hard it is to get a dog to just fall. I remember literally, you got the camera frame. I remember Max, the producer, was his dog, being under the camera, kind of grabbing his legs and kind of swooping him down, but then his arm would come in the shot, or so we got rid of the dog.
Amazing.
Through editing, Chase was my editor. He did a great job. We were able to cut around the dog, and I'll tell you how to save that. I'll be honest. Any filmmakers out there listening, always get at least 1 minute of your actor just reacting to nothing. Just film them looking out or breathing or looking at other actors. Just get about a minute. Because in the editing room, that will save you. Because I can always have...
That is a great tip.
Oh, it is. Because I can always have about 2 or 3 seconds where I can cut away to just a look, to then cut back to do whatever. And that's what saved us. I had we had enough I didn't film him that, but we had enough footage that I could cut away to him just reacting a few shots, looking with his hands, and then cutting back to the other actor where I could get rid of the whole dog, because that was a good 20, 30 seconds that we had to just exercise out of the movie. But so you have this short time period to make this movie. And so I remember, we cast it, and I remember, and you always remember the horror stories. You never remember the great times, just as a filmmaker. So I remember we cast it, and I remember we had 4 people show up for 9 speaking roles in the movie. Wow. Because it was in the summer, and that was the one mistake I learned. During the school year, there's tons of people, but because I was doing this program in the summer, there was nobody around. So luckily, Matt came in, but I remember Matt was the #1 Jack Sparrow impersonator in Savannah, Georgia at the time.
I'm sorry, what?
Oh yeah. Oh, this is great. This is great. Yeah, he was at this famous Robert Louis Stevenson house in Savannah. They have a Jack Sparrow and all these other pirates, and I remember he had a mustache and a goatee. We set the story in the 1950s because that's where I know it's supposed to be in like the 30s or something, but I always liked the 50s. So as a filmmaker, I put my touch on it, and I wanted it in the 50s. And I just love that time period, and the music's great. We could have kind of this jazz music in there, this public domain jazz music, and all this stuff. But the thing was, he had this mustache and goatee, and I was like, it's not really 50. I mean, but somebody out there did. So we just said, okay. As long as your hair can be short. And he's like, oh, that's fine. I got a wig. I wear a wig, but this facial hair I need. So, you don't ever think about that when you're making a movie, but you're going to run into those things. I remember we had to deal with that. And the one mistake that I made in the movie that to this day I just don't like was the casting of the maid. Because I apologize, I don't remember her name, but she was African American, but she was the only one who auditioned for that role. Nobody else came in there. And when you watch the movie, you're going, did I really make a 1950s movie with a maid who's black, and she's in it real quick, and she's kind of just the only girl in this club? And that always made me like a little like I screwed up there. But she was the only actress that showed up, so it wasn't me casting it that way. It was just kind of how it was casting that way. And then, because nobody showed up, we actually ended up getting some of the crew. So one of the sound guys is one of the poker players. Max, the producer, is the Texas guy.
I love that guy.
I know, right? Like,
it's great.
It's so random, though, right? It makes no sense that he's Texas. So it was just Max was like, "Yeah, I'll do it."
It's Texan named Frenchie.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's outstanding.
And then another filmmaker, we couldn't find the bully, and I really love. Stephen King writes the best bullies. Mm-hmm. Every story, if you look at it, he has a great bully in every one of his stories. My favorite of all time is, and I actually got to meet him once, Jeffrey DeMunn, from The Walking Dead, and he was in The Green Mile, and The Storm of the Century, which I think is one of the better of the Stephen King miniseries, which is a whole other podcast. But his character of Robbie Beals in The Storm of the Century, he is just such an asshole. But the worst part is he's an asshole that kind of makes sense, which is what Stephen King does, which is the worst, right?
Yeah,
he's the worst when the jerk is right. You can't stand it, but Stephen King does that. And so we had that in The Man Who Wouldn't Shake Hands. Can't remember the character's name, but Justin Edmondson was actually a fellow filmmaker. He was, and I was like, Justin, do you act ever? Because he had that look. He had that long hair.
He had that real smug asshole.
He did. He had that preppy kind of.
He played that well.
And he's not that at all. That's the best part. Justin's just a cool kind of, hey, what's up? Oh yeah, let's rock this out. He played that well.
Yeah, he did great.
He really had that nastiness to it, and of course, because in the story, he's the one who he loses at the poker game, and then he comes back, and this guy's having this really great time, and that's the one ththing I do love when the maid talks to the lead character. And it was one of those things like I was there and I saw it and I was like, real quick, we got to get the shot. When he has his hands on the table the whole time, and that was our whole point. He's got to always have his hands separate and in control. But at one moment, when the maid leaves, he puts his hands on the table as if he's gripping something and talking about your masturbation comment. That's, symbolism.
Now I can't cut that
out. But he that's actually why I did that. I wanted him to grab the table, and that kind of, he needs to, do something. But then the jerk comes in and grabs his hand and shakes it, and that's the whole, and ends up getting killed. It was just so, I remember wanting to get that shot real quick, and I love accidents like that when you notice, like, oh God, we got to get that. But then all of that was, we filmed at this one location, and we had a couple things, and then we had to go outside, and we did all of that, I think 7 days. I think we filmed the whole movie in 7 days, something like that. And now again, that's, week 4 we're filming of the 16 weeks. So now I got to get to do the edit, and then we got to edit, and we got to do the color correcting, and the color correcting is the worst. If you've ever sat through that, it is the worst process of filmmaking. I will pay somebody $1,000 an hour just to you do it. I don't want to sit through it because it's going between two shots of like, does this match? Does this match? Do you like A? Do you like B? It's kind of thing when you're in the eye doctor.
Yeah.
Number 1, number 2. Number 1 is, oh God, can you just show me when it's all done?
Yeah, someone make a decision.
Just make a decision. I don't want to sit through this. But yeah, we had to do all of this all in 16 weeks and then premiering it. And that's just the film stuff. In the personal side of things, I went through a breakup in the middle of this with a long distance girlfriend who, I'm not going to go into the details of that, but
good, she's listening.
Yeah, I hope. Yeah. You're a jerk. No. But at the same time, like I'm spending 8 hours a day editing. Then I'm going home and I'm calling somebody on the phone to save and salvage whatever personal life I can kind of have. In the interim, I had developed the point where I was going to have an internship with Roger Corman Studios. To the point I was like, it was going to happen. We were waiting for Roger Corman to come he was in the Philippines producing a movie, and he had to do the final paperwork, but they ended up giving it to somebody they knew who was a college student instead of this grad student coming out of nowhere. So they gave the internship to him. And so I didn't get this internship. So that fell through. So all the time, I'm having to just go back and forth, and I say all this not for you listeners to have sympathy for me. Like, I'm okay. Like, we're good. but it was just such a surreal moment of just, what you're going through to make this movie in such a short time period that your personal life's still going to go on when you and I remember specifically there was one day, and Nolan's a great guy. He's a wonderful professor, and he's kind of my mentor. Actually helped me get into teaching. So he let me come into his classroom years later and kind of teach a little bit just to get the feeling. So great guy. But I remember one day he was having issues on the phone. Like, he was talking to somebody and he was really mad, and he was coming in to see a rough draft of the film. And I saw him in the hallway. I saw him shouting, and I remember telling Chase, my editor, I'm like, this isn't going to go good. I don't care what you say. I don't care what we say to him beforehand. He's not going to like anything we do. And he came in. He's like, all right, show the movie. Let's watch this. Play the movie. This is terrible. This is the worst. You got that,
Ouch.
And I'm just, and you just sit there. You just have your arms folded. You're like, it's like your parent shouting at you, like, okay, when's this over? Like, okay. And he goes, you need to do something. So fix all those things I told you about, and I'll see it later. He walked out the door, and I don't know if he knows this today. So Nolan, if you're listening, I apologize. But I told Chase, I said, he didn't watch anything. Because he was on his phone texting while he was doing all this stuff. And this is the day of like the TTT, BBB, FFF, he didn't watch anything. And I remember specifically telling Chase, I'm like, change one thing, but leave the rest alone. And watch. He'll like it. And Chase goes, what? I'm like, just do this one. I think it was like, it's cut off like 2 seconds of a shot. It's like, do that, because he's right. Cut off 2 seconds, and then the rest, just leave it. A couple days later, he comes to watch it, and he's good day. Oh, all right, let's watch this. Watches it. This is great. This is what, see, you did exactly what I want you to
do. That's amazing.
And Chase is just looking at me. He's like, look, how did you know? I was just like, just,
Is all of that in that NASA equation that says movies are impossible?
That's part of it. You get the personal
Yeah.
life, and that's the other thing too. As a filmmaker, your personal life doesn't stop. You know, as I've said a lot of times, when you're a director, if you have a significant other, they have to kind of understand you're kind of having a lot of affairs in a weird way. Like you're having an affair with the main actress and the main actor, and you're having to smooth egos, and you're also having to have an affair with the director of photography. You're having to smooth 100 people that your attention is going to be split, which, is why a lot of people do end up having breakups and stuff like that. So, but it wasn't because of the movie that the breakup happened. That was going to happen anyway, now that you reflect years later. But it was the, okay, how much do I dedicate to this movie now when dedicating to, okay, do I take a day off and just focus on talking to this girlfriend at the time to salvage this? Well, I can't. I've got, if I don't hit this mark, I'm going to miss the premiere, and it just gets chaos sometimes. Yeah. But we got through it. We got through it. It premiered. One of the last things I remember the most of it, just not really horror stories, but just the making of, is none of us had played poker.
Good for people making a poker movie.
So again, filmmakers out there, do your homework. But poker always goes to the right. And I remember when we filmed it, we went to the left. But none of us on the set. There's 50 of us on the set. Nobody caught this. And I didn't know. I never played poker. I mean, I played poker in college like twice, And, Nolan is watching the movie, and I remember him just leaning and going, "You never played poker, have you?" I go, "Why?" You tried to do that like, "Oh, yes, I have. Why?" And he goes, "You always go to the right, you idiots." I'm like, "Oh, shit." And he just starts laughing. Nolan just starts laughing. He's like, "All right. Good luck fixing that." And we did. And Chase somehow, I don't know. So what I remember is we filmed it where we were going to just use like a constant take. I remember setting it up kind of in a circle, kind of like that 70s show style. Well, what we ended up doing, but that was us going left. Well, in order to finish it, we had to cut it up. And so we just have still shots of them. Nice. So it looks like it's going right, and we reversed a shot. So one person moves his arm left, now he moves it right. And so we were able to fix that. But I remember that was like a last minute, like, shit. And then, oh my God, I just remembered this. Holy crap, I'm sorry. You guys are, they're looking at me like, oh my God. The spider on the face.
I love the spider on the face.
No, you did. You are lying. I know you're lying because that sucks.
Oh my God.
You laughed, didn't you? You laughed.
Oh, I 100% laughed, but I loved it. Like, oh God.
So sorry, this is no, that's what I'm saying. It's terrible, because the whole point I thought it'd be really cool because Savannah, have you ever been to Savannah?
No.
Mm-mm.
Oh, gorgeous town. Very Gothic. Love Savannah. But Savannah, there's all these just hanging moss, and it's that southern Gothic look. But there's always these spiders that just get everywhere. And I remember, they have a lot of like bamboo palm trees that just the spiders love. So, you walk in a park and there's just this, from a distance, it looks like a palm tree. You get close to it, and it's just webs. It's just up and down webs.
God, that's gross.
So we had this idea. If this guy's sitting in the park at the very end and nobody's talked to him for a day or two, there'd be this spider on him. I thought it'd be really cool that, you turn his head, and a good scare to the audience would be the spider. Well, again, we couldn't get a live spider. Nobody could, you can't train a spider. So, nobody, and, I'm sure, I don't remember talking to him, but I'm sure, the actor's like, no, you're not going to put a spider on my face. And then we thought, oh, well, we'll just do it digitally. We'll fix it in post. The classic line. And we did not fix it in post. We got this crappy special effect from somebody who just wouldn't work with us. We kept like, do you got it? Do you got it? Do you got it? And it was too late to get somebody else to do it. And when we got the shot, I remember my editor called me, and I went to his house, and he goes, "I'm going to play this for you." Yeah.
Oh, that's never good.
And he just goes, I know, and he just goes click, and I see it, and I go, oh. But this was like a week before the premiere.
Oh my God.
So it was like, well, do we cut it out? Well, the problem is we used practical and digital, so he has this web on his face that was practical. So if we cut out the spider, it's just this weird And to this day, people think it's Pete Moss. That's what a lot of people who watch it are like, oh yeah, why the weird spider? Because he had the peat moss on his face. It's like, well, it's supposed to be a web. But that was like, that did not work at all. So, it's funny, years later, I'm showing this to my students, and I show The Man Who Wouldn't Shake Hands to my students as kind of a lesson of like, okay, how do you adapt a story? How do you, it's good. And I explained to them the process of filmmaking. And they always laugh at that. And it's always, and you're sitting there, it's just, as a teacher and you're watching your work and, you gotta be vulnerable a little bit. But every time they laugh, there's a little part of you that's just like,
You die a little inside every time.
It's not our fault, You turn to we tried. That's how you feel every time. But that was like, but then, it was great. We got it all together after 16 weeks of chaos and madness. And I do remember this. I remember right before it was to premiere, I got a call on my phone, and I had talked to this girl that I was breaking up with hadn't talked to me for like a week, and then she calls me right before. It's like, I just want to tell you, good luck on your film. And I'm
cool.
like, oh, hey, click. So I had to do that right before I go to watch this movie on the big screen. So even at that moment that you're doing the premiere, life is still there. But hey, it premiered, and we got a lot of cheers, and people really enjoyed it. And I remember the most satisfying thing was, most movies were 2 minutes because of that short time period. I mean, and what I got a lot, my cast and crew, and what we, a lot of the compliments we got was just, wow, you guys really did a pretty impressive film for the short time period. And wow, it's, and I remember when the Stephen King title came on, because now the one thing you can't do is say Stephen King's The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands. That was part of the rules. But I remember that when it said by a story by Stephen King, the crowd just clapped. Now that was like a really satisfying moment of like, oh, okay, great. Well, hopefully we did some justice to the story, and I feel we did as best as we could given what we had and the resources and where we are. But then again, you go back. I remember a few years later, I went back and reread the story, just because I was bored one night and I'm reading it, and it's like, oh wow, there's some stuff we missed. There's some stuff that we could have done, and that's how I remember the Tales from the Dark Side. Oh, I could have done India. I could have done these different things, but at the same time, it's a time capsule. It is what it is. It's what you had to do at the moment, and yeah. So those are some of the chaos memories that I have of the moment.
What were you? So you got this. You made this movie. What were you able to do with it after all was said and done? Like, were you able to do any like film festivals or anything like that?
Yeah. That's the downside of a dollar baby. In our research, we didn't realize the limitations of it. And again, and I say this with all respect to Mr. King and to, Mrs. DeFilippo and all the stuff they did, but it's a great opportunity, but because of the restrictions, which is totally understandable, you really can't do a whole lot with it. And I don't know what it is now, but this is before the YouTube era. This was really like YouTube was around, but nobody really utilized it the way they do now. But the rules were you can't publicly display the movie. Well, that took out YouTube, that took out Vimeo, that took out any of these places where we could put it online for people to see. And then what we found out once we had really kind of read the legal document. So it's our fault, but you realize like all the restrictions. So you can enter it into a film festival, but you can't have prizes associated with the festival. So if it's a cash prize or it's a sponsored, where like Miramax hosts this film festival or something like that, you can't put it in there because again, it's protecting Stephen King.
Gotcha.
To the point where it's kind of like we got into a couple film festivals. I remember actually Cedar Rapids Film Festival. I got premiered it. We premiered it there in Savannah. And I've sent it out to a few film festivals, but there's really not that many that don't have some prize associated with it or something like that. So to be honest, I feel bad, but a lot of it sat on the shelf for a lot of years just because you can't do anything with it. Now, if Stephen King wanted to do something with it, he could. And that's actually, there's this Stephen King fans and collectors will probably have it. I have a copy of it, but there's they called it the Skeleton Crew. But there's 2 movies that he put out, 2 VHSs that he put out that were dollar babies. One was Frank Darabont's Woman in the Room, and another one was an adaptation of The Boogeyman that somebody had done. That was very straightforward adaptation of Boogeyman. What I remember that story is it's if you ever seen Army of Darkness, there's that guy that has the whip at the beginning. He's kind of bald and he has like stringy long hair. He's the main guy.
Okay.
I always remember, I'm always like, that's the Army of Darkness guy. That's kind of cool.
Scott Beck and Brian Woods doing Boogeyman?
Yes, they actually remember, they had called me as a Stephen King fan when they were thinking about doing some Stephen King's adaptation, and they had asked, some ideas of what are some good Stephen King short stories. And that was one of them.
And you were like the man who would not shake hands.
Yeah, well, I was like, you can't do that one. It's already done. But yeah, they're doing an adaptation of The Boogeyman, and I'm not sure where they're at with it.
We met them at Midwest Monster Fest and talked to them about doing an interview.
Oh, great guys. I did movies with them in high school.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. We were. They went to Bettendorf, and me and actually Justin Markson and
I know Justin.
Yeah, well, Justin's my main actor in my movie. I was the best man at Justin's wedding. And Justin's
awesome.
in The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands.
Yes, I did see him in the credits. I saw him in the credits.
He is the radio voice guy. That's Justin.
Crazy.
Because Justin's in every one of my movies, and so I was like, how do I get Justin in this movie? Because he couldn't fly down, and I didn't have a role for him at that time. But I was like, oh, you could be on the radio. So in the scene where we kind of pan from, the main guy's reading, and kind of you hear this like, hey, this is Bobby. That's Justin on the radio. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh my God.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we really haven't done anything with it. But recently, like I said, as a teacher, I've been able to kind of pull it off the shelf and kind of show my students, and I've been able to really get out there and to be honest, it's actually kind of great. Like this podcast is kind of a life to it that I really am grateful that you both have offered because nobody knows a lot about this. But I also know nobody knows a lot about how to make a dollar baby and the process and stuff. I think in hindsight, like a lot of us have talked about it, who are associated with the movie, that would we have maybe done it if we had known kind of the after effect? Honestly, probably not, just because the opportunities to get our movie out on YouTube and in a couple of those, it would have been better and a better opportunity. But at the same time, I would never want to trade in this experience of being associated with, the guy who introduced me to reading, the man who got me into this whole other world that I never knew about. And I got to, at the end of my life, I get to say I had some piece of that universe, that Dark Tower universe that we all say. I was the first one who did The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands. And I think there's another one out there. I think somebody else did one. I've never seen it.
There's like just a fan made one on YouTube.
Is that was that's what I feel. And there's a lot. So we were official. We did it all by the book and I've got Marcia DeFilippo's awesome signature, and I got all the paperwork. So if you ever do another one, CM and I get auditions, right? Absolutely.
All right, cool. I just want to make sure we have it. We have it on record.
It is on record.
It is recorded.
Yes.
It's officially on the books.
Oh man, I wish I could have another opportunity to do a Stephen King.
So I think we've made it clear, like, we love the concept of the club, and Stevens is such an intriguing character and idea. We're curious what your theory on Stevens is.
Oh, man. It's interesting because I remember reading The Breathing Method. I know Stevens has more to do with that than he does in The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands. The way that I viewed Stevens, he's a guy that puts the skeletons away. I don't know what he is. And I know there's that weird part in The Breathing Method. It talks about they say he's like a vampire. There's something that they talk about.
He looks ageless.
That's what it was. That's what it was. Yeah.
I mean, in the Man Who Would Not Shake Hands, the guy's like, that guy was Stevens. It was your grandfather, right? And he was like, that's how I remember. And I remember talking to Kevin that we didn't want to use Stevens in a weird, because it really isn't Stevens' story, and he really doesn't have a lot to do with it. But we did have a few moments. Now, there's a funny story with the actor who he did.
hire for Stevens. How we found him, because he just has that look to him. And he actually had another classmate friend of ours, Kevin Treadway, did this great movie called The Monster, where it was basically this girl's being chased by the kind of My Bloody Valentine, hostile creepoid with a gas mask looking big guy. It's just bloody and gross and guts. Well, he chases her down into this abandoned building, and there is Dracula. So it's this old monster versus this new monster. It was a cool idea. We all loved that movie. But the guy who played Stevens, he was the Dracula.
That's fantastic.
And it had that voice, that Shakespearean kind of voice, and he kind of did that with the Stevens. How may I help you? And but what's funny is, if I always love this. If you are a fan of this great movie called Major League 2, Stevens plays the butler. The guy who played Stevens plays the butler in that movie. So if you look, there's a scene. In our movie, he does this thing where he kind of rolls his eyes. He does the same thing in Major League 2.
So Major League 2 is now Stephen King canon.
Yes. It's hilarious.
Stevens.
There's a 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon with that. It's great. I remember we actually bought the movie at like a disc replay, and for $2, I was like, we gotta watch this. And we fast forward this scene, and there he is.
That's hilarious.
But I think that if you were to expand that story, I think Stevens is definitely the man who knows it all, who knows where all the bodies are buried. Who, to be honest, I think Stevens is the one who, when things show up, like in the story, I know there's that great part where they get the money for the person who died, and it's for the widow. And I think Stevens the one who comes around and takes the money, and I think that's Stevens who does that, because whatever he is, he's this. I think though, and I think you talked about in the podcast, Ian, about if there is this other world up there, the other rooms. I'm pretty sure there's some Randall Flagg Dark Tower character, Storm of the Century weird guy that is Stevens. I do think that in an expanded world, but we didn't touch that. We purposely were like, let's just have a creepy looking butler to kind of keep it more realistic in this kind of way that we did this story. But that's what I think Stevens is. I think he is the vampire. I think he is the ageless creepy thing that wanders those hallways, and probably it is still. I do think though that in the Stephen King world, it is the same Stevens.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That I do. Sure. I don't think that's a Stevens grandson. Or something. No, I think that's
we
Stevens.
don't buy it.
Yeah, that's Stevens. So that's my theory on
awesome.
that, I guess.
So I just have 2 more questions for you to wrap things up.
Sure.
And I'll kind of ask them together. So what are some things that you're interested in right now, or some things that you're working on or looking forward to? And then kind of going along that, how has COVID sort of affected that? And how do you think that's going to play out in the coming months?
Oh, wow. So we just finished, I just finished my first feature film that we did, titled right now, Any Woman's Blues. And it was a challenge. How do you make a movie during all of this, and how do we play it safe? And we did it as best as we could, with being safe on the set, being distant, using longer lenses, so people aren't as close, but it looks like they're close, limiting this. I mean, I literally was a crew of like 1 or 2 at a time. I filmed it, framed it, directed it, I did all the cinematography, the lighting, all that stuff was just me, because that limits who's on the set. What I do think will be interesting is, as I've talked about in some articles about, what's going to be rolling out. Are you going to see people kissing in movies? Probably not. And that's a weird thing, right?
Yeah, I did not.
How do you do a love story where people don't connect? And to be honest, we did that on my film. Because the film is about a breakup, and one of those intricate moments with a breakup is that, especially because the whole movie is about kind of the breakup, the day of the breakup. It all takes place in one day. And what's fascinating to me is that a couple of minutes after you break up, the realism of it all, but is this true or not true? Is this, wait, did you just, no, you didn't break up with me. Wait, no, you are. What? That's such an odd moment, right? And we wanted to focus on that. Well, at one point in the movie, I wanted them to have a connection. And we talked about it. My actors were safe about it, and they, we made sure that we didn't take our temperatures every day or anything like that, but we did make sure, like, everybody who came to the set, like, are you okay today? Do you want me to wear masks? Do you want to do, and everybody's like, okay, no, we're fine. It's okay. We'll risk it. It's okay. So there's that risk factor in there. But at that moment, at that critical moment, we talked about it and said, well, we need to do some connection. That fear, I think, of that physicalness of connecting, we were like, oh, I don't know if we do, but we decided the hug actually worked. The hug works. There's that connection of people, and it actually set a more powerful moment in the movie than anything. So that actually worked out. Nice. That we didn't, but I think if this was any other time with the whole COVID thing, I don't think we would have been like, oh yeah, we could totally do that. Yeah, let's do that. So I think you're going to see less of that in movies. I think you're going to see less connection, less physicalness in movies. Even fighting scenes, I don't think you're going to have as much fighting. I think you're going to have more thriller type thing where it's more, we're just going to talk about it, not really do, stuff like that. But I also think, to be honest, what'll be interesting to me is how it changes how we do tell stories, and how we do, and speaking of Stephen King, he had to redo something I read about If It Bleeds. One of those short stories in there had people, it's set in 2020, and they were on a cruise. Well, Stephen King went, ooh, that doesn't work. So he actually, I remember before the book was printed, he had to redo it because of the whole COVID thing. Yeah. So If It Bleeds had a whole different direction
crazy.
Of the story.
I love a copy of the original.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like it'd be interesting to read that, but he said no, anybody reading this book is going to go, nobody was on a cruise in 2020. We all know that. No, that I think that's what's going to change a lot. And just honestly, I think it's going to get to a point where we're going to run out of new material. We know they're already holding some movies back, like Bill and Ted's Face the Music and all these other kind of movies. And I think then there's just going to be that risk factor. Like, okay, we're just going to start making movies and we'll start being it safe. And I don't know. I honestly, I think we're just going to have to wait and see, because I think the scarier thing is going to be this winter. So talk about a horror story. That's...
Gotta love those good old Midwest winters.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Will be great.
We'll see how that goes.
Do you think that we're gonna see a big influx of independent artists? Because, as you said, I mean, you working on these independent movies, you have actors that are more willing to take those kinds of risks for the art, because you typically make art you believe in when you're just kind of an independent.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think we're all going to take those risks. I mean, honestly, the three of us did that coming into here. We had a conversation. Do we want to wear masks? Do we got to be careful? All that kind of stuff. That's a legitimate thing that I think we as artists have to ask now.
Then we just start spitting in each other's mouths.
Yeah. Then we're just,
But that's how we close the show, by the way. I don't know. I should have warned you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Walk. But yeah, I think you're going to have that where it's just going to be, and to be honest, I think we see that in America. I think we see a lot of people doing that where it's like, okay, we can be cautious, super, super cautious, or we can just take a risk, or we could just, do that. And I think you have to have that a little bit, that especially to entertain. But I do hope people are doing it safe. Like I said, like we did on the movie set, we were safe about it. We all knew we were comfortable. Even when we went into we went into somebody's house, even though I had been around the actor for all this time while we were on the set, so I'm sure if they had something, I have something. That's. I want to be respectful for their children and so I put on a mask. And even though they're like, you don't have to wear it. Well, no, honestly, I'd rather to make it comfortable. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. Where it goes, though, I think we're going to just, until we get a vaccine, I think we're just going to have to see each new project that comes out. We're going to have to see where it goes. Yeah, I think there'll be risk. I think there'll be the ones who can't control that beast inside that needs to make something. That's kind of what we did. We were just sitting around, and I said, well, could we do a movie? And that was actually one of the great things we ended up doing not too long ago. Roger Corman did a quarantine project where he wanted you to do a movie from your house. And we actually all got together. We said, let's do this. You guys film on your phone. So I had my actors film themselves on their phone. They sent me the footage. We compiled this 2-minute movie for this contest, and we didn't have to leave I didn't leave my room. It was,
and it worked. That short pulled together so well.
Thank you very much. But that was all them. My actors and the crew, them filming themselves, and just it was fun. It was great, but it was also inspiring because that made us go, hey, we just did this. Could we do a feature?
Yeah.
Which we did, and it was. We had a moment that there was a scare that we had to kind of shut down and say, okay, we got to refocus. And are we gonna finish it? We don't know, but we ended up, to be safe, we filmed it. So if we only could do this, we had a short. I just needed a real kind of fixer ending that I didn't like, but we did it. But then the scare was over and we were able to finish it, and we came back and everybody was great, and it turned out. So, as long as you're safe about it, as long as you're taking it seriously, I mean, that to me is the number one thing. Take this seriously. I mean, as any Stephen King fan knows, there can be institutes out there. There can be conspiracy theories. There can be, those other people, quote unquote. However, I think there's enough science to kind of go, be safe, don't be dumb, be cautious, and I think that's just the way to do it. As long as you're taking it seriously, I think you can do it.
So if our listeners want to follow you on your filmmaker journey, is there any place they can look you up and follow?
Yeah, come to the screenings. No, no, I don't have a website. I don't have any of that. But certainly, if you've ever wanted to reach out to me, you can reach me at my school, MOT Charter High School in Middletown, Delaware. So MOT Charter High. You can find me on the webpage. You can email me. It's a long email, so just look it up. But the other thing I do contribute to a podcast. If you don't mind me promoting that for a second, Hollow 9 Network. So Hollow, the number 9. We just shout about movies and talk shop and talk about Stephen King comes up every now and then and those great movies. So yeah, you can follow me there and just again, I just appreciate this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Yes, Ian, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah.
It has been a real pleasure talking to you, and we could talk for hours about film and Stephen
I could
King
sit in this
adaptations.
room for hours. That's the my gosh.
Please
I love
let us
to see
know
him.
as you have stuff coming up when you finally do the release of your feature film. Please let us know. We'll happily share it out on all of our social media.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to Derry Public Radio. Have long days and pleasant nights.
Hey everyone, Sam Alexander here. Thank you for listening to this bonus episode with director Ian Klink. Thank you again to Ian for taking the time to come into the studio and talk with us. We had a blast. As always, find us on social media at Derry Public Radio or email at derrypublicradio@gmail.com. Check out our website, constantreaders.org, for everything Stephen King and Stephen King adjacent, and visit our Patreon page for bonus episodes and merchandise. That's all for now, listeners. Goodbye.